I upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that is something that interests you, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. So the title of today's video is, Are the Clippers Screwed? Because, well, they might be. It was initially going to be The Clippers Are Screwed, a little bit more sure of itself with the title, but I realized after the Ibaka signing that they might actually be okay. So the reason I made this video is because even though, yes, the Clippers did lose in the second round to the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs, I almost said last year, it is a couple months ago. Even though that happened, I am very confident that they're still the second best team in the Western Conference, even if they really shit the bed in the second round. The biggest team in the way of them winning a championship is, of course, going to be the Los Angeles Lakers. So in today's video, I wanted to reflect on what the Clippers did this offseason, what the Lakers did this offseason, and if it's actually going to make any difference.
Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
If this audio sounds weird, it's because I'm recording with something else because Audacity decided it was going to shit the bed on my laptop, so I'm making do. But the way that I see it is, the Clippers had a good offseason, but the Lakers had a great one. And in order for the Clippers to overcome the Lakers, they had to have the great one, and the Lakers had to have the good one. And it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but let me explain myself. So let's first talk about the moves that the Clippers did. I feel like a lot of people are really sleeping on this Shamet for Luke Kennard move. While I am the biggest proponent of Shamet and a huge supporter of his, unfortunately, he was kind of cut out of the rotation in the playoffs because defensively, he is not good, and offensively, he's kind of inconsistent. I would say at their absolute peaks as shooters, Shamet is a better shooter than Luke Kennard. However, at their more normal level, Luke Kennard is just a more consistent three-point shooter, and he's less likely to have these really poor shooting games. And when Shamet is having a poor shooting game, he's pretty useless. For Kennard, he can put the ball on the floor and create. He averaged like 4 assists per game for the Pistons this year. He's just a better overall shot creator for himself and others, and he's a guy who can be a big part of a rotation rather than a guy who's getting cut out because he can't play defense. Luke Kennard, not a defensive guy either, but he's a much better offensive player. So I think that was a huge upgrade for the Clippers, and I very much commend that move. Unfortunately, the next big move they made was re-signing Marcus Morris to $16 million a year. The thing about that is, I think Marcus Morris is a little redundant on this team. Now, I will say losing Montrezl Harrell makes me not hate this move as much, because I have been of the opinion with the 2019 Clippers that they just had too many options, and too many options that weren't really creating shots for others. So it was just like trading who would have the ISO bucket on this possession. And Morris was a part of that. Marcus Morris is a player that I find hard to rank because he is decent enough skill-wise at creating his own shot, but he's also way too happy to do so. Like, Marcus Morris should not be your primary shot creator or really anything close to it. He should be like 5th or 6th or even 7th sometimes in the pecking order. Probably not 7th, that's a little extreme. But like, there would be times where Morris was taking the second most shots on the team, and that's just straight up unacceptable. And that's my issue with him. Like, he thinks he should play and shoot more than he actually should. And for that reason, it holds back guys who should be shooting the ball more than him. We saw this happen with the 2019 Boston Celtics, him and Terry Rozier. Like, you take those guys off of the roster, and suddenly this year there's 20 more shots available to the guys you want taking those shots. Morris is one of those players. Now, with Montrezl Harrell leaving, which we'll talk about for the Lakers in a second, this does make me feel a little bit more happy because, well, Montrezl Harrell is not there to take shots away from some of the bigger guys, so hey, I guess Morris can take those shots instead. And honestly, Morris is a better shot creator, and he's a lot better of a defensive player, so I guess it's kind of a win there, but it's too much money to me for what he actually brings. Not a whole lot more than he's worth, but just too much for what he brings to this team individually. And I would just rather them have let him walk, and they signed JaMychal Green back to a much cheaper contract, and they used their money that they had on someone who's actually worth a lot of money, like a point guard, for example. So JaMychal Green signed with the Denver Nuggets for, I believe, about $7 million a year rather than 2016. That extra $9 million could have been useful somewhere else, but I guess not, because I'm pretty sure the Clippers did not have Morris's bird right, so it's not like they went over the cap to bring him back. And then they just signed Serge Ibaka for $10 million a year after that, so they had some cap space, and they wasted it on bringing back Morris when they could have brought back Green, and then actually signed a point guard like Rajon Rondo, for example. But then now let's talk about Serge Ibaka, since I mentioned him. Serge, I think, was a huge addition for the Clippers. Initially, I thought this offseason was just an L for the Clippers, but as soon as they brought in Serge Ibaka, I was like, you know what? They probably had a good offseason. They still did not address their point guard issue, but they did bring in a center who can be very good on both ends of the court rather than just good on one of them. So Serge is a center who can shoot the three ball, is decent enough finishing around the basket at the dunker spot, and then defensively, he's not as good as he used to be. He's started to get more cement feet as he's gotten older, but he can play the 5 and situationally play the 4 depending on what your matchup is, and I think that's very valuable. The issue with Montrezl Harrell was offensively in the playoffs, he was getting locked down because his game is pretty simple, and then defensively, he's not a defensive guy. I don't know why so many people believe that Montrezl Harrell is a good defensive player just because he's athletic and he sometimes makes flashy plays, but he is consistently at the wrong spot when a pick and roll happens and really anything outside of 3 feet from the paint happens. So Serge Ibaka is more capable of that stuff, and I think particularly in a matchup versus the Lakers, you can put him on Anthony Davis, and if they're running that 2 center lineup, you can put Zubac out there on whoever the center is, and I think you can match what LA does offensively with your defense. Now obviously we didn't see this matchup in the playoffs last year, and the Lakers went more AD at the 5 in the playoffs, but I think that was really just because of the matchup they had. Against the Clippers, I think they would have primarily gone 2 big men because of their lack of interior defense. Now that they have Serge Ibaka, that interior defense has improved drastically, and that weakness is not really a weakness anymore. But unfortunately, now we have to talk about the Lakers, who signed Montrezl Harrell and traded for Dennis Schroede. I think they also drafted somebody who's decent. I can't even remember. No, they don't have a draft pick. I don't know where I got that from. Cut that out. As I said in the intro, or towards the beginning, unfortunately, the Lakers had a great offseason while the Clippers just had a good one. And on top of all of this, it's actually possible for the Lakers to sign Marc Gasol. He's looking at either him or returning to the Raptors, so Marc is in play for them as well. And if they get him, I think that kind of seals it for the Clippers. But Montrezl Harrell, look, I didn't know that the rest of the league knew he was a fraud. I knew he was a fraud, but like the fact that he got $5 million, I certainly thought he was getting double digit into the millions for sure, but apparently not. Montrezl Harrell, even though, yes, he is not someone who should have played as much as he did in the playoffs, especially against the Denver Nuggets where he was getting cooked by Jokic, he's definitely somebody who is a valued role player and a valued offensive option off of the bench. Montrezl Harrell can, at least in the regular season, score high points per game off of the bench as a pick and roll man, and paired with a great playmaker, I imagine he'd become even more useful because he now has LeBron James on his team rather than the best playmaker on the Clippers being like Lou Williams. So that's obviously a big upgrade in that department for him in terms of being a pick and roll partner. Also, he's solid offensively, and even though he's not great defensively, he's on a team that has the interior defense that they can put around him to make up for his lack of interior defense. And then Dennis Schroede averaged like 19 points per game last year on good efficiency, shot well from 3, has been a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter for his entire career, and I would not be shocked if he ended up being a starter for them because I don't really think they have any other option to point guard. So the starting lineup will probably be Dennis Schroede, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and JaVale McGee or Marc Gasol. So that is a very good starting lineup, and then off of the bench, you're still going to have Alex Caruso, you're going to have Montrezl Harrell. If they bring in Marc Gasol, you're going to have JaVale McGee. That's just a pretty damn good bench unit. And the thing is, for the Clippers, the one thing that they were supposed to always have on the Lakers was depth, but now they don't really even have that. So they're kind of screwed. The Clippers had a good offseason, but the Lakers had a better one, and it's for that reason that unfortunately I'd have to say that the Lakers really just secured another championship, or at the very least secured them being a better team than the Clippers. So that's kind of just my thoughts on what happened this offseason with the Clippers. There are rumors that the Clippers could trade some of their bigger contracts, like Patrick Beverley, in exchange for a guy like Terry Rozier on the Charlotte Hornets. Unfortunately, I don't think that's a solution because Terry Rozier is not really a playmaker. Really, he's just a point guard who shoots the ball a lot. And even though he's pretty decent at it, that's not what the Clippers need. Playmaking wise, there's really few options. I mean, the Timberwolves just traded for Ricky Rubio, so I can't imagine they'd be up for trading him, though you could make that trade work with Patrick Beverley if they were up for that. But unfortunately, just in the playmaking department, there's not a whole lot of options for them to improve there, and that's kind of their biggest hole right now, and I don't see it improving. So yeah, the Clippers did their offseason well, but the Lakers did it better, and for that reason, they're kind of screwed. And unfortunately for Clippers fans, not winning a championship this year probably means being horrible for the next 8 years or so, because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are gonna be leaving in free agency after that season. I'm almost certain of that. So that's rough. That's very rough. But yeah, shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Go check out his channel. That's gonna be linked in the description. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.